Welcome to this week's episode of the American Serial Killer Guidebook with your intrepid hosts, Elton and Cherish Morgan.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the American Serial Killer Guidebook. I'm your host, Elton Morgan.
I'm your co-host, Cherish Morgan.
And we're the Morgans. In this week's episode, we'll be covering the crimes and punishment of Ángel Leoncio Recendiz, a.k.a. the Railroad Killer, who throughout the 90s brutally, and I mean brutally, raped and murdered 16 people. But he's suspected of killing as many as 23 or more. My apologies. He was known as the Railroad Killer because of his penchant for riding the rails around the United States, choosing his victims simply based on how close to the railroad tracks their homes were. For almost 13 years, he traveled the country choosing victims at random, raping, murdering, and then robbing innocent men and women before either jumping back on the train or stealing their vehicle and dumping it in San Antonio, Texas, before sneaking back across the border into Mexico until his next murderous expedition into the U.S. After a short stint on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, Resendiz turned himself into Texas authorities before being convicted of murder and sentenced to death. In 2006, Resendiz paid his debt to society with his life by lethal injection in the Huntsville Unit in Huntsville, Texas.
So did he have a home in San Antonio where he was staying and continued these murders, and then family down in Mexico, and he just jumped back and forth?
He actually had a common law wife who, she lived in one of those small towns south of the border in Mexico. San Antonio, I guess, was just, his access point, into Mexico. Either, I'm guessing that's probably where he would dump the vehicles. He was familiar with the train yards there. He'd probably hop a train into Mexico because they don't ever search trains and shit going into Mexico. And I'm guessing, I don't know for sure because the research wasn't that detailed or the information available online wasn't that detailed. But the small town that his wife lived in, my guess is that there was a railroad tracks that went through the town.
Maybe he hopped the train.
And probably hopped it in San Antonio. He knew which train went where. Yeah. Caught it straight home.
I wonder how far of a distance it was between his girlfriend and San Antonio to get back and forth.
Oh, that's a good question.
If it was something that he could just hop on the train and go do what he did in San Antonio and then get back to Mexico all within the same day.
Let's see. Let's look it up. San Antonio to Mexico, 150 miles.
Okay, so that's something he could do within a day and get back.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So he would just zip on down to Mexico. He would meet up with the old lady, his wife, and until he was ready to come back.
I wonder if she knew anything about it.
I don't think so. Stay tuned to hear details of his horrific crimes, and remember you can listen to all of our episodes on our website at taskg.net, where you can also visit our store for all of the coolest serial killer clothes and merchandise. We've got all kinds of cool stuff. We've got mugs, tapestries, t-shirts, hoodies, posters. If you like BTK, John Wayne Gacy, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, everything. You name it.
Even stuff for babies, onesies and whatnot.
Exactly. You want to put your baby in some cool-ass serial killer gear? Stop by our store.
Yeah.
You can also help support our show by following the links in the episode description and the transcript. And remember, when you sign up for a paid Buzzsprout account using our link, you get a free $20 Amazon gift card to help you get started with your own podcast. Now that all that is out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. Born Ángel Leoncio Recendiz in Puebla, Mexico in 1959, he was raised by a single mother until he was 6. He was sent to live with his aunt and uncle, who Resendiz later said sexually abused him before returning to live with his mother at the age of 12.
This happens a lot. Serial killers that are raised by single moms, and then the single moms kind of don't know what to do with them. Maybe they're acting out at a young age, and then they send them to live with their grandparents or aunts and uncles or what have you. This seems to happen a lot with
Yeah,
serial
and
killers.
another issue that seems to pop up is that a lot of them have been traumatized by sexual abuse.
Something, yeah.
In their past. And I guess some people, I mean, it gets to the point where you're so angry and hurt by it that you feel like somebody needs to pay.
Yeah. They don't know how to express themselves and or how to act out.
They hold that in for decades until it just explodes on some poor victim one day. And then they realize, hey, I got some relief from this by doing this to this person. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
You know, other people work out. These people murder.
Yeah.
It's rough.
That's why it's important if you see the early signs of mental health or whatever to get out and get them checked out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. His family remembered him as a lonely person who rarely got into trouble, but he only had a 7th grade education. His mother said he was sexually assaulted by a group of older boys when he was 13 or 14 after going swimming in a nearby river. So he was sexually assaulted by family members. Then he was sexually assaulted by a group of boys. I can see where this pent-up anger and hatred came from.
Oh, absolutely. Plays his little heart.
Yeah. As a teenager, Resendiz illegally crossed the border into the United States. He was arrested by authorities in Michigan in 1976 and sent back to Mexico, but he quickly returned and was arrested again in 1979 for brutally beating an 88-year-old man at his home in Miami, Florida. Wow, 88 years old. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for assault and robbery, but he was released in 85 after serving only 6 years. You know, that's our
judicial system.
That's our judicial system at work right there. Overcrowding.
That's pretty common. You know, you do 50% or 85% or.
It's 85 now. It wasn't back then.
Yeah.
Now it's mandatory.
Right.
So.
I thought each state differed.
It may be. It may be. I think it is. Yeah. I know that here in Oklahoma, it's 85%.
Yeah.
For violent crimes or sex crimes. After his 1985 release from prison and deportation to Mexico, Resendiz crossed the border and in 1986 shot a homeless woman 4 times with a .38 caliber weapon because she insulted him. He then dumped her body in an abandoned farmhouse in Bexar County, Texas, after killing her boyfriend as well, making them the first known victims of the railroad killer. Resendiz claims that he and the homeless woman took a motorcycle trip together and they had brought the gun to practice target shooting before she disrespected him, leading to her death. He claims he shot and killed her boyfriend before dumping the body in a creek between San Antonio and Uvalde because the boyfriend was a practitioner of black magic, but his body has never been found. It wasn't until a 2001 confession that authorities found out about these murders, which Resendiz hoped would move up his date of execution.
So it says they took a motorcycle ride. Were they having like a three-way type of relationship, or what was going on there? Because
that's a good question.
How did it go from a motorcycle trip to the boyfriend coming into play?
I don't know. Who knows what was going on, you know? Just some freaky deaky happening.
I guess so.
In June of that same year, he was arrested and sentenced to 18 months in Laredo, Texas for sneaking into the U.S. with a fake U.S. birth certificate. He was again deported in May of 1991 after serving 2.5 years for weapons possession and fraudulently applying for a Social Security card, but soon returned to the U.S. I didn't know you could go to prison for fraudulently applying for a Social Security card, but I
No,
guess
it seems like they don't punish anybody, right?
Yeah, but that's crazy. I guess it's a federal offense. So, another 2001 confession stated that Resendiz killed 33-year-old Michael White in 1991, whose body was found July 19th of that year. He had been beaten to death with a brick because he was homosexual before being dumped in the front yard of an abandoned house in downtown San Antonio. And you mentioned how he had been sexually assaulted, how that was common, and like I had said before to you, that I feel that people who hate homosexuals, people who are constantly attacking LGBTQ community members, do so because they themselves, to a certain extent, are homosexual, bisexual, whatever, and they fear that about themselves. So they tend to target others and take it out on them.
Yeah.
You know, that's just my opinion. Take it or leave it. But I do feel that, you know, the more people tend to exhibit hatred towards LGBTQ members, they hate themselves because they think that they might be gay.
Especially if they haven't came out yet. They've got all that rage inside of them.
If they haven't accepted it yet.
That's what I'm talking about,
And they're trying to fight against it.
Yeah.
So.
Embarrassed. Yeah,
and there's no reason to be. Be who you are.
Exactly.
Love who you want to love.
Yep.
You know, I mean, there's no reason to hate yourself for it.
Yep. I agree.
6 years later, on March 23rd of 1997, Resendiz made his way to Ocala, Florida, where he came across two teenage runaways from Woodstock, Illinois, who wanted to get jobs picking oranges. Resendiz told them he could get them jobs, so they agreed to hop a train with him. Once they reached the train switching station, Resendiz told the young man to follow him to go talk to a guy about work, but instead he beat the 19-year-old Jesse Howell to death with an air hose coupling, leaving his body beside the railroad tracks. Resendiz then went back to the train car where the girl was waiting on him, and Howell's 16-year-old fiancée, Wendy von Huben, was raped repeatedly and tortured for 8 hours before being strangled with his bare hands and buried 15 miles down the line from where Howell was killed, where she was found in a shallow grave in Sumter County, Florida. Resendiz didn't waste any time because he beat another transient, 54-year-old Robert Castro, to death with a wooden board at a Colton County, California rail yard in July of 1997. Within a month, Resendiz had quickly left California far behind, ending up in Lexington, Kentucky. On the 29th of August, 1997, a young couple who were attending the University of Kentucky were walking down the railroad tracks. They were taking a shortcut from one frat party to another when they had the unfortunate experience of encountering Ángel Resendiz. What transpired was recounted by the 23-year-old girlfriend Holly Dunn Pendleton, who is the only known survivor of Resendiz's trail of terror. Pendleton said that she and her 21-year-old boyfriend, Christopher Meyer, were approached by Resendiz, who demanded money, but when he couldn't find any, he bound and gagged them before using a 52-pound rock to crush the skull of Christopher Meyer, effectively, and I mean effectively, taking his life.
Seems like he was trying to get rid of the stronger person the last couple times, and so he could get to the woman, but before, he was just killing them because they were homosexual.
I think this one was more just a crime of opportunity. And I think part of the whole thing where he felt the need to rape the women, I think this comes back to the whole homosexual thing. I think he was trying to prove to himself that he wasn't gay by having sex and raping as many women as he could.
Right.
Oh, well, I can't be gay. If I'm raping women, gay men don't do that. Right?
Right.
So
I'm going to get rid of the guy first.
Yeah, it's just overcompensation for being unable to accept who he was.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad, really.
Just that most serial killers don't kill a couple or go for couples.
Most
one person where there's no
solo
evidence.
Kills. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They usually have a type, and they stick to that one particular kind.
Yeah.
His type was anyone near the tracks. If they were near the railroad tracks, they were fair game. So, and he's a small guy, so it was ballsy of him to go after couples.
Yeah.
You know? Resendiz then walked over to Holly Pendleton saying, "He's gone. You don't have to worry about him anymore," before proceeding to beat and rape her, leaving her with a broken eye socket and jaw. Holly managed to walk to a nearby house where a man cut off her mouth gag and called police, who reported that she had a stab wound to the neck and multiple cuts to her face. After testifying against Resendiz, Holly Pendleton had dedicated her life to helping victims of sexual assault through her nonprofit Holly's House in her native Evansville, Indiana. So if anyone ever feels the need, they're looking for a charity, someone to sponsor Holly's House, they could really use your help, because they're always there to help.
Especially if you've lost someone or they're still missing.
Yeah, especially to violence, something like that. 1 year later, on October 4th of 1998, Resendiz made his way to Hughes Springs, Texas, where he found himself outside the home of Leafy Mason, which was only 50 yards from the Kansas City Southern rail line. He entered the home of the 87-year-old and proceeded to beat her to death by repeatedly bashing her head in with an antique flat iron used for pressing laundry.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, she's 87 years old. Leafy Mason, that's the kind they don't name people cool names like that anymore. You know, those, you could tell that was another time.
Just that poor grandma. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
She probably took pride in the fact that she used these old flat irons to do her laundry and stuff like that, you know, and then this guy come along and she's somebody's grandmother, you know, that's terrible. An 87-year-old woman. Short 2 months later, on December 10th of 1998, he was in Carl, Georgia, where he beat 81-year-old Fannie Whitney Byers to death with a tire iron in her home near the CSX transportation railway line. First an 87-year-old, then an 81-year-old. I mean, this guy, oh man, he drives me nuts with this. And he's beating them to death with these heavy iron items. It's just like, shit, dude. He didn't need to do that. I mean, they weren't going to put up a fight. It's not like they could run off. I mean, if he was needed to rob them, I mean, lock them in a room or something. Fucking, he didn't have to beat them to death. Mm-mm. It only took Resendiz a week to make his way back to Texas from Georgia. On December 17th of 1998, Ángel Recendiz took the life of 39-year-old Baylor College of Medicine pediatric neurologist Claudia Benton in West University Place, Texas. Dr. Benton and her husband George lived in the incorporated community in southwest Houston with their twin daughters who were in 6th grade. Their home was unfortunately only a quarter mile from the Southern Pacific Railroad tracks running through the city. The night before, on the 16th of December, 1998, George Benton took their girls to Arizona to visit relatives, but Claudia was unable to attend due to a work presentation she had the next day. Claudia worked through the evening before going to bed, and around midnight, Resendiz sneaked into the house through an open door, stopping in the kitchen before heading upstairs. Once there, he found Claudia Benton asleep in the master bedroom and began to attack and rape her repeatedly before stabbing her 39 times with a butcher knife he found in her kitchen. Getting ready to leave, Resendiz noticed Miss Benton was still breathing, so he decided to grab a 2-foot-tall bronze statue sitting in the bedroom and beat her with it in the head 19 times until he was sure she was dead. Unable to locate the keys to Claudia's Jeep Cherokee, which law enforcement later found hanging in the pantry, he stole any cash he could find, ivory figurines, jewelry, electronics, and a meat cleaver before ripping the plastic cover from the steering column, hot-wiring the vehicle, and leaving the destroyed lives of the Benton family in his wake. Her Jeep was found 2 days later, December 18th, 1998, in a motel parking lot near some train tracks in San Antonio, Texas. This is all right before Christmas. Mm-hmm. I mean, right before Christmas. Jeez Louise. And I don't know who found her. The husband came home. Maybe the girls found her. I mean, that would ruin Christmas forever.
It would. Yeah, they'd be stuck in their head forever.
And check this out. A coroner later said that Benton's stab wounds were so forceful they broke several of her ribs, punctured her lungs, and that 3 went through her back and came out the front of her chest. You know how hard you have to be stabbing someone to go completely through the back, through everything inside, and out the chest plate?
There would have to be a lot of anger behind that blow. But why? I mean, she was just a random person.
This is what makes me think that it's about his internal battle with his sexuality and who he was. And I think part of it, because not just that, but he was poor. He grew up poor. He grew up being sexually assaulted No one caring about all the people that were supposed to love him.
His mom sent him away.
Yeah, everybody that was supposed to care about him turned on him in some way. And here was this, and I'm not trying to make it, racial, but here was this wealthy white doctor who probably had pictures of her and her husband and kids around the house who were happy. She had everything and he had nothing. It was just anger, hatred. He was angry at the unfairness of the world. Yeah. That's just, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. So I do not have a degree. It's just my personal opinion on it. But to stab someone so hard that it goes through their back and comes out their chest plate, that is passion. That is passion right there. He is angry. Yeah. And so that's the only reason I could think of that he would be so angry. She was found on the floor covered by a blanket with only one arm and her legs sticking out, with a plastic bag partially covering her head. She had 2 broken bones in her right forearm, and the bones in her face were shattered from trying to fight off her attacker. Her husband, George, is later quoted as saying, "It's been hard. There's nothing harder I can do in life than tell my daughters their mother's been murdered." Investigators found DNA at the scene, but the link tying Resendiz to the crime was a fingerprint left behind on the piece of steering column he left behind in the Benton's garage. So when he was ripping, I don't know if you know, but on the steering column, on a lot of vehicles, whenever you pull the key out and you turn the steering wheel, it locks, right? So that plastic part that covers the steering column, if you rip that off, there's a little bitty sliding bar that's down in there. You can either break that bar or you can slide it out with a pair of needle nose pliers, and that unlocks the steering wheel. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, so then when you hot wire it, you're able to drive it. So, when he ripped that piece of covering off, he stupidly threw it on the floor with his fingerprints all over it. The fingerprints came back belonging to Rafael Resendiz Ramirez, which was one of Ángel Resendiz's dozens of aliases that was suspected of multiple killings across the country. It was this identity that was initially labeled the railroad killer, since all of his murders took place near train tracks. Authorities were able to link the crimes together and to him because the victims were mostly women who were beaten to death and sexually assaulted, and whose cars were consistently found abandoned in the San Antonio area. He always went back to San Antonio. Yep, that's part of what got him pegged, because they found the similarities between the crimes. It was mostly always women. They were sexually assaulted. Their vehicles were stolen, and that found dumped in San Antonio. Yeah. I mean, that's a pattern. Yeah. San Antonio railroad tracks. Right. Like you remember on Creature of Habit. Yes. On Home Alone, how that guy, every time they would rob a house, he would run the water in the sinks all throughout the house and stop up the drain so that everything overflowed, and he called themselves the Wet Bandits. Oh, yeah. Well, at the very end, it was like, "We're the Wet Bandits," and they're like, "Oh, well, guess what? Now we know every single house you robbed, so now you're going to get pegged for every single one." Yeah. Well, same with him. You keep following that same pattern. Every single crime that has very similar MO is going to be pegged on you. They always leave something behind. Yep. Yep. Near the beginning of summer, on May 2nd of 1999, the bodies of Norman Skip Cernick, 46, and his wife Karen, who was 47, were found with their heads crushed by a sledgehammer, still lying in bed together in their Weimar, Texas home. It looked like they'd been attacked while they slept, and Miss Cernick was sexually assaulted post-mortem, and they were covered with blankets. So this means that he stood over their bed with a sledgehammer, bashed their skulls in with it, and then he had sex with the woman with her head turned to mush, right next to the corpse of the husband. That's, oh my God, that is just out there. Wow. They lived next to the church where Norman Cernick was a pastor, and right across the street from the railroad tracks, making them a likely target. Oh, he's going to hell. Oh yeah, definitely. Their truck was found 3 weeks later in San Antonio, like so many others. Just a month later in Houston, Texas, Naomi Dominguez, 26, was found murdered in her bed after being raped. When authorities found her, she had a huge hole in her head from being hit with a pickaxe, but no weapon was found. This is just getting more and more violent.
Yeah.
But I got something else to tell you here in just a second.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you're lucky I didn't bring it. I was going to show it to you, but I didn't want to. This is the kind of thing that could traumatize you.
I like gory pictures, so.
No. Her car, like all the others, was stolen, but this time, rather than head to San Antonio, Resendiz drove it to Schulenburg, Texas, all right, where he killed Josephine Convica, 73, on June 4th. He did this the same day that he killed Naomi Dominguez, and he killed both women with the pickaxe. This is believed to be the first time he killed two different women on the same day in different cities. This time, rather than take the pickaxe with him, he left it sticking out of Josephine Convica's forehead, and cops realized she was murdered only 3.5 miles from the Cernic double murders. I found a picture that it's from the crime scene of Josephine Convica, the second pickaxe murder, and it shows her laying in her bed with her head on the pillow and this giant fucking pickaxe sticking out of her forehead.
He got her right in the front?
Right over her left eye.
Oh, my God.
Swinging it right-handed from right to left, coming down at an angle, and the sharp, thin side of the pickaxe penetrated her skull over her left eye and went at an angle down inside behind her right eye.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm telling you, I saw this picture. I was thinking, I got to show this to Cherish.
I want to see it.
What I was going to do is I was going to save it until we were recording, and then I was going to hold it up to you so that I could get your record your reaction.
Yeah. I love stuff like that. You showed me.
I actually, after the first time.
I am not a serial killer.
The first couple times I looked at it, right before I went to bed at night, I was thinking about that picture, and I was like, oh, I shouldn't have looked at that. I don't like stuff like that.
I do.
Like when I was younger, I liked to watch Faces of Death.
Yeah, I still do.
And some of that stuff messed me up.
Yeah.
I actually used to work at a funeral home.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah.
And for the first 6 months of having to pick up bodies at people's homes who had died from natural causes or not so natural causes, we had to pick up a guy who's, I guess he was about 65. His wife had gotten mad at him and killed him on accident, I think. She picked up a ball-peen hammer, and he said something to piss her off, and she swung the hammer and hit him right in the forehead, and it left a perfect quarter-sized hole in his forehead. Well, it was over his right eye.
Yeah. And
you could see through that hole into his head.
See, I've always wanted to be a surgeon and just kind of dig into people's bodies and just mess around.
Are you sure you're not a serial killer?
I'm positive I am not a serial killer.
I don't like that gory stuff.
I just like it. It just interests me.
And whenever we had to go on another run, and we picked up a guy who used to be a linebacker for OU, a giant Native American guy, and he was probably 6'8", and he probably weighed well over 400 pounds. He was a big guy, and he had been dead for like 3 days, and then you have that, I forget what you call it, where all your blood pools at the lowest point from where you're laying.
Where you're laying, yeah.
Yeah. And he had like a shag carpet, right? It was like this long carpet. So he had laid there for 3 days with all of this weight. And when we tried to pull him off, a lot of the carpet had become embedded in his skin. And so it like pulled off chunks of it when we were trying to get it. It's me and another guy. The other guy is, for those of you who don't know, I'm 6'4", a big guy, 200 plus pounds. And this other guy, he's 5'6", maybe 160 pounds. We're trying to pick this guy up, and this Terrence, and the police are standing there looking at us, and we're like, can you give us a hand? They're like, it's not our job. I was like, oh, you dick. Anyway, we finally managed to get him. We had this like mobile thing with the gurney, and it's like a cherry picker type thing to help move people around. But that was crazy. Anyway, this episode is not about my life as working in the funeral home doing body recovery.
I will watch videos on stuff like that all the time. It's my favorite pastime. Like, I'll watch Google pictures and watch videos on it. I don't know. I just love it. But I am not a serial killer.
And that's one thing I never understood. We've been married for, I don't know, what, 300 or 400 years now. So I just never understood that. But
how many years, babe?
300 or 400 easily.
Okay.
Easily. All right, let's get back to it. In the back room, police found a Schulenburg newspaper discussing his crimes and a toy train, which they immediately realized was a taunt from Resendiz. So he leaves behind a newspaper open, I guess, with his crimes on the front page, and then a toy train next to it. Like saying, this is what I've done. This is how I get around. Catch me. Right? If you can. So he was enjoying this. Yeah, he was enjoying this at this point. Yeah. So he tried to steal Josephine Convicka's car, but he couldn't find the keys. So he was forced to continue using Naomi Dominguez's white Honda Civic. Dominguez's car was found on the 11th of June in Del Rio, Texas, on the International Bridge. Okay, that's the bridge that's used to kind of zip back and forth across the border right there. It's a major border crossing. Resendiz quickly made it to Gorham, Illinois on June 15th of 99, where he murdered 80-year-old George Morber and his daughter, 51-year-old Carolyn Frederick. Check this shit out. George Morber was found tied to a chair with a phone cord and shot in the back of the head with his own shotgun. Okay, and Carolyn was found raped and beaten to death by the same shotgun used to kill her father. Authorities say that once Resendiz killed Morber, he helped himself to some food, but then Carolyn stopped by to clean for her dad. And that's when he raped her and beat her so violently, he broke the shotgun into two pieces.
Good Lord.
Yeah. Morber's truck was stolen and found a short time later in a school parking lot 60 miles south of Gorham in Cairo, Illinois. In mid-1999, a nationwide manhunt for Resendiz was in full swing, and on June 2nd, he was picked up near El Paso by Border Patrol trying to sneak across the border into the U.S. Unfortunately, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, a.k.a. INS, ran fingerprint and background on him, but it came up empty. All right.
They didn't know who they had. So.
He was deported back to Mexico. This is so fucking ridiculous. I'm constantly hearing on the news how people who are awaiting trial for multiple murders are accidentally being released from county jails and shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There should be a minimum IQ to work in places like this.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Investigators later found that although West University Place Police had notified INS of Resendiz, and those are the police where the doctor was stabbed and beaten to death, the woman, her husband, was out of town with the girls.
Yeah.
Well, that police department had notified INS of Resendiz in December after he killed Claudia Benton, but he was never entered into their fugitive database. And many people felt that this oversight was directly responsible for the deaths of Naomi Dominguez, Josephine Convicka, George Morber Sr., and Carolyn Frederick. Because if he had been arrested rather than deported when they had him, he wouldn't have been free to kill again. So because of that one little oversight, because somebody didn't enter his information, they had something better to do, they didn't enter his information into the system, 4 more people quickly were murdered violently.
You would think with just that doctor being killed, that wouldn't have been overlooked, just because.
Yeah, you think, okay, this
higher
is
up people,
right? She's a doctor. Okay, well, this guy's killed this woman. We need to get him in the system, you know, because he's a known border crosser.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, someone felt that it wasn't a priority, and it resulted in 4 more deaths almost immediately.
Unfortunately.
In an effort to make up for their mistake, the federal government placed Ángel Recendiz on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, taking the place of Osama bin Laden with an initial reward of $50,000 that quickly escalated to $125,000 within a few days. This was nothing but a chance for them to try to save their asses. this is a PR.
They were trying to save their ass.
Yeah, it was a PR stunt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, they were so humiliated, and the fact that it was their fault that these other 4 people were murdered because they had him and let him go. They were so humiliated that they replaced Osama bin Laden with this guy. Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, that's bad.
It's like and then tripled his reward in the course of a week. It's like, oh my God, I don't know who was in charge of this, of putting the people in the database and then all this stuff. Usually it doesn't come down to just one person. Usually it's a string of deficiencies.
Yeah.
That tend to lead to this type of situation. But if I was Claudia Benton or Benton's husband or a family member of these 4 people that were killed afterwards, I would be suing the shit out of INS. I mean, I would be suing the shit out of them.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous because their negligence caused the murder of people that were dear to them. Yeah. And these are older people. I mean, except for the Dominguez and Convica, they were younger women, but it's aggravating. Needless deaths. Needless deaths when this guy was in custody. The FBI tried to gain the assistance of Resendiz's half-sister, Manuela Karkowitz of Albuquerque, New Mexico, but she resisted at first before finally agreeing to help Texas Ranger Sergeant Drew Carter bring him in. After guaranteeing Resendiz's personal safety, family visits, and getting him the psychological testing he needed, Manuela got him to agree to turn himself in at the U.S.-Mexico border on the International Bridge in El Paso on July 13th of 1999. Once in custody, he was charged with multiple murders across Texas, Florida, Illinois, Kentucky, Georgia, and was the main suspect in many more that remain unsolved to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's that 23 or more,
Right.
The collection of fingerprints, DNA, and the jewelry and other items provided by Resendiz's common-law wife in Mexico that were identified as stolen from multiple victims all tied him to the string of murders. What he would do is he would come to the States, he would murder people, he would zip back across the border and go see his wife. Well, he liked to steal shit from his victims. He would give them as gifts to his wife. And then he would head off again, kill some more people, steal some more shit, take it home to his wife. So after he turned himself in, investigators contacted his wife and they were, working on the case and all that stuff. And that's when they found out. She's like, hey, he gave me all this stuff as gifts. Well, that's when the investigators took it and they matched it to missing items from all the crime scenes. So that was used as evidence against him.
Feel sorry for the lady.
Yeah, that's what makes me think she knew he was doing something, but I don't think she had any idea that it was
to that extent.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he was just stealing some trinkets here and there from people out of cars, maybe robbing a house or something. I don't know, but I think that if she knew that the items were from women that he was murdering, she wouldn't have accepted them.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, she helped the authorities as much as she could. So, his defense attorneys attempted to use the insanity defense due to him believing he was some sort of an avenging angel killing evildoers, but the jury saw through that shit. They took into account his multiple felony convictions and prior prison time in both the U.S. and Mexico. And in May of 2000, Mr. Ángel Recendiz was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death in the murder of Dr. Claudia Benton.
Just one victim?
You may ask yourself why he was only tried on one murder. And that's because he either received immunity for his confessions or the other jurisdictions didn't follow through with the prosecution due to the expense and him already having the death penalty in Texas, which amounted to guaranteed death. So, like I mentioned earlier in the episode that, like with the Michael White murder, a few times I mentioned the 2001 confession. These are the confessions that he gave once in custody. And some of them were, they promised him immunity on them. I mean, he already had death sentence in Texas. Mm-hmm. You can't really get any more deader than that without being dead. So, He figured, well, they can't charge me with it, so I might as well be honest, and that's how they got the rest of the information. They figured they already had him. He was already going to be executed, so promise him whatever the hell he wants. It doesn't matter, so that we can get some closure for these families.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, it was worth it.
Yeah.
He was going to be executed anyway. That's what they wanted. He was convicted. So, you know what? Give him immunity. Give him immunity all he wants. Give us all the information. Let us be able to close these cases. Let us be able to tell these families why their loved one was killed. Let's get them some closure so that they know that you are the perpetrator and that once you are dead, it closes that chapter on those murders.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's why he only got convicted of one murder. During his execution that was delayed by 2 hours while the U.S. Supreme Court decided on his appeals, Resendiz's final words were, "I want to ask if it is in your heart to forgive me," he said to the relatives of his victims who came to witness his execution. "You don't have to. I know I allowed the devil to rule my life. I just ask you to forgive me and ask the Lord to forgive me for allowing the devil to deceive me. I thank God for having patience with me. I don't deserve to cause you pain. You did not deserve this. I deserve what I am getting." And with that, the drugs were pumped into his system, and at 8:05 p.m. on June 27th, 2006, Ángel Maturino Resendiz was pronounced dead at the Huntsville Unit in Huntsville, Texas.
It's sad he was only asking for forgiveness there at the end, but he should have came clean and admitted to all the murders, all 23 or more of the murders.
I think there were more. I think there were more that maybe he was just too ashamed, or maybe they were involved, other gay men that he didn't want to bring
be
out.
Embarrassed.
Yeah, he didn't want to be embarrassed. He didn't want to be associated with it. I don't know.
Yeah, but if you're asking for the Lord's forgiveness at the very end, you need to be completely honest.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's a little late at the end, asking for forgiveness right before you're about to be executed. He should have been spent all the years that he was on death row trying to help the families of his victims in some way.
Yeah.
I'm sure they probably didn't want to talk to him, but he should have been doing everything he could to bring closure to as many families as possible. He should have been completely honest, but who knows? We don't know what goes through the mind of someone who's committed crimes like this. You have to think everything that he went through when he was young. That is a lifetime worth of trauma right there. And then you pile in all of the murders and who all the stuff that we don't know about that happened to him, that can break you mentally. His mind was obviously broken because a healthy mind does not validate that type of behavior, those types of actions.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But we want to thank you guys for being with us this week. And, just to kind of give you a heads up, I know it's been a few weeks since our last episode, and I owe you an explanation for that. I am completing my master's degree, and it's the end of the semester. See, my brain is fried. It's the end of the semester, and I graduate in a couple of weeks. So it is, anyone who's gone to college knows that, you got finals, you got final exams, you got final papers, you got final projects, and all of April and the ass end of March has just been hectic. We're going to try to get another episode out as soon as we can. As soon as these classes are over, it's, open road. We got the whole summer ahead of us. No classes. So we'll be back on schedule with our weekly or episodes every 10 days, every week, every 10 days. You know how it can work when you have a family and work and kids and stuff.
It's hard.
Yeah. So, but we do the best we can. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for sticking with us. And, you got any parting words, my love?
I just want to say I love all you guys, and thanks for listening to us.
Yeah. We enjoy doing this together. it's a bonding experience. I mean, we've been together over
400 years.
Yeah, how much bonding do we really need at this point, right? But it's something that we enjoy together. And,
absolutely.
People wonder, how do you stay together so long? Well, it's finding something that we're both passionate about. That's how. And sharing it. There are times when she doesn't want to record and I do, and some people would say, why don't you just record it without her? Well, this is a partnership. I told her, without you, there is no podcast, so I'm not going to do this on my own. I'm not going to record on my own. It's either the two of us together or nothing at all. All right, that's enough. That's enough of the whole Lifetime Hallmark stuff. But all right, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot. Make sure, like I said, to check out our transcript and episode summary. You can buy us a coffee. You can visit our Patreon. Help out the show. This stuff's not free. Yeah, this equipment's expensive, and hosting for the podcast is expensive. So, help us out.
My Cash App is. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye.
See you next time.
Thanks for joining us this week on the American Serial Killer Guidebook. Be sure to subscribe. Visit us at taskg.net. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And join us next week for another exciting episode filled with murder and mayhem.